Hello and welcome to another episode of WVU Extension Today on West Virginia Public Broadcasting and YouTube. I'm your host, Zach Harold. We're going to start today with a bit of a history lesson. We're going to take a trip to WVU's Jackson's Mill. Joe's going to walk us through the ins and outs of the mill, starting with the very early days all the way to modern times.
Hello everyone, my name is Joe Obidzinski and I'm the historian here at WVU Jackson's Mill. So as we talk about Jackson's Mill as the first state 4-H camp in the nation, it's important to talk about how it came to be and how it developed. So what we have to do is we have to go back a little ways into the early part of the 20th century, all the way back to 1915. In 1915, the first 4-H camp was held here in West Virginia at Camp Good Luck in Randolph County. This became quite a popular idea, and more camps were held, and there was a decision made that we needed to find a place where kids from all across West Virginia could come and have 4-H camp. But why was it Jackson's Mill? This site, although the Jacksons no longer owned it, by the turn of the 20th century, or by 1900, it still was a place that was popular and that people were coming to. The problem was that all of that land that the Jacksons had once had been sold and parceled off, and all that really remained of Jackson's Mill was about 5 or 6 acres, what is now our historic area. People in the local community, the local town of Weston here in Lewis County, were kind of worried that Jackson's Mill might just disappear altogether. When they heard that people in Morgantown, specifically with the Extension Service, were looking for a 4-H camp, they said, hey, we know a spot. You should come here to Jackson's Mill. And that, in kind of a short way, is a good way to describe kind of how it all happened. In 1920, William Kendrick, along with some of his closest colleagues, came down here to Jackson's Mill and took a tour of the place. They left convinced that this was the place that needed to be the 4-H camp. So the following summer, they brought together a group of people and they held the first 4-H camp in the nation down in our historic area at Jackson's Mill. Back then, the only thing that was really there was the old mill, a stone marker, and about 5 or so acres of rolling hills and grass. But this was perfect. They weren't looking for anything like we have today because early on, they just wanted to be able to hold camp. But after that first camp, the ideas began to develop rapidly. So within the next couple of years, they bought up multiple acres and began to lay out a plan for what Jackson's Mill would look like. Now there are some things that are in this plan that are here today and some things that aren't. Sometimes you can plan some really neat stuff, but it doesn't always mean that it works out that way. But this does show us that the first people who were planning out Jackson's Mill had a lot of great ideas for what this place could look like and how it could develop. One of the most important things that they needed to do was they needed to figure out places where people could actually stay, people could actually learn, and people could actually eat. Now in the first few years of Jackson's Mill, this was done in tents and mostly outside. But they knew that they wanted to make this place a permanent location. So that would mean permanent structures, or today, cottages or cabins. And these cottages are named after many of the counties here in West Virginia. And that's not by accident. First Director William Kendrick developed partnerships with many people in the counties across the state to make these buildings a reality. The way the partnerships generally worked, and each one was a little different, was that the county would either raise money, donate funds, or just donate people to help construct the buildings here on campus. And that is how many of these buildings came to be. Now originally, they decided that they were going to have one for each county. Well, as time went by, they realized they didn't quite need that many, but all of the ones that had been built here bore the name of the counties that helped contribute. So for now, let's head out into Jackson's Mill and take a look at some of these places and take a look at some of these buildings. And we'll also kind of see how things changed from the very beginning in the historic area to the large campus that we have today, which, by the way, is over 525 acres today. So behind me is a very large stone gate, and it sort of looks out of place in our historic area because it's just one of the only things that sort of doesn't fit. But it actually does fit. It fits a very important thing. This was the original main entrance to Jackson's Mill. And in fact, for decades, hundreds of thousands of 4-H campers and visitors here to Jackson's Mill would have come right through these gates, and the first thing they would have seen next to them is the Jackson Mill right there. Now today, you have to come down to our historic area in order to see that. And you wouldn't even really pay attention much to this gate down here if you really weren't coming down here and taking a look at it. But this was the original main entrance to camp. So it is very important why we still have it here today. As we come from the area around Jackson's Mill here, you'll see that there's a row going down this road here of these various cottages that we talked about before. As I mentioned, that these cottages are in fact, in many cases, named after the counties that helped to fund and to get them constructed. The one that is closest over here is the Lewis Cottage, which was completed in 1922 for the obvious reason of being the local and closest community cabin, so that is the reason why it's down here. Remember, the original heart of camp was in our historic area, so Lewis Cottage was right next to it. So we're standing out here in the middle of this grassy open area, kind of referred to as the Camp Green or the main field here at Jackson's Mill. It's been a place where kids have run around and played games. Baseball diamonds have been set up here before. Soccer games have been played on here. This field has been home to a lot of different things, including the Mountaineers. In 1922, as a way to both find new ways to utilize this brand new space that the state had and the university had available to them, and also to get some attention as well, the team actually came down here and actually used this place to practice and even play some scrimmage games. In order to make this work though, they needed to be able to have a way to shower off after getting all sweaty and hot and things like that. So they actually helped by contributing some money, along with some local folks here in Weston and the university itself, to create a bathhouse, which was some of the first shower facilities that could then be used by not only the West Virginia University Mountaineer football team, but also everyone who camped and visited here at Jackson's Mill. Behind me is the Mount Vernon Dining Hall. If you're familiar with that, it's probably because that name is synonymous with George Washington, who lived at Mount Vernon. But that is located in Virginia, not here in West Virginia. So how is it that we call this place the Mount Vernon Dining Hall, and why do we do so? Well, a few years after camp was developed, the idea was to create a permanent dining hall. This was one of the central things that the initial plans and development of Jackson's Mill was focused on. So they were looking to create it, and they wanted to do it in a pretty central location. Well, from where we're standing right here, this is a pretty central spot on campus, and that's why the dining hall was selected as being there. What happened was, in those early years, as construction was beginning on the project, some young 4-H'ers accompanied the first director of Jackson's Mill, William Kendrick, to a conference in Virginia. During their trip, some of these young folks were able to take a trip over to Mount Vernon and got to see the interesting history there. The story goes that on the return trip, one of them happened to remark to Director Kendrick that it was really a shame that so few boys and girls here in West Virginia were ever going to be able to see something like that. Remember, this was almost 100 years ago, so travel was a lot different than it is today, and nobody had the internet. And so they decided to incorporate features of Mount Vernon into the design of the dining hall, and that is why we call this the Mount Vernon Dining Hall. Behind me is the Assembly Hall. This is one of the largest meeting spaces we have here at Jackson's Mill. This was another important early development for Jackson's Mill as a camp and as a facility to hold large events. Director Kendrick and also all of those planning camps wanted a place where people could come and gather, especially to get in out of the weather and to be able to hold things outside of the warmer summer seasons. The Assembly Hall was built and completed in 1923. Originally, it only went as wide as the opening is on the front porch there. As you can see, there are two sort of enclosed wings on either side. Those were added later. Interestingly enough, the reason for their addition is also a way to help us understand how Jackson's Mill survived a very difficult period, as the entire nation did, during World War II. During that period, from 1942 to 1943, our site was actually home to a training facility that trained naval air cadets, soldiers that were serving in the Navy, but that would be landing and taking off fighter planes on ships. In needing to have a larger classroom space, they were able to help with some money to expand the Assembly Hall, and that is one of the primary reasons why we were able to expand it. This was a very good benefit for Jackson's Mill, as this allowed our space to grow too, which is one of the neat things about being able to have the space that we have today. So a couple of these buildings behind me actually are some very interesting spaces. There are so many buildings here at Jackson's Mill, and each one of them has their own history. So we're only really getting a chance to share just a few stories and a few bits of information here. Again, like I said, there's so much to learn here at Jackson's Mill and so much to explore. But the two buildings behind me have been classrooms and meeting spaces for many, many years here at Jackson's Mill. Behind me over here is known as the Electric Energy Center, or EEC as most people know it today. But it was originally known as the Farm Home Electrification Building, and it was built in about 1940, and it was a partnership with some of the local power companies. Much like Flameway Hall was a partnership with the gas company, this was a partnership with the electric companies, and again, in a very similar type of way, this was a place that had places set up where they could do classes and demonstrations that would teach people the using of electricity and all of the information that they would need in order to be able to run their various appliances and things like that over the years. As with everything, things eventually evolved over the years. Still today, there's a couple of demonstration space, kitchen spaces inside of there, but most of those spaces are now classroom spaces and gathering spaces that can be used for all kinds of classes and all kinds of things that we can teach here at Jackson's Mill. On the other side over here is what is known as the Southeast Learning Center, or SLC. For many years, though, this was known as the Sewing Center, as there were a lot of sewing machines and classes that were held here, and this was a very, very popular place to have it. Now this, like EEC, was completed again around 1940. Eventually, it was added to and renovated and expanded in the 1960s. More recently, it had housed a computer lab so that we could actually have computer classes held here for young people. Today, our computer lab has actually evolved itself again, and so now that space is actually a meeting space, and we're using other types of technology like laptops and other types of things that we're able to use here now. So behind me, we have our brand new state-of-the-art STEAM building. STEAM standing for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics, is one of the newest buildings that has been completed here at Jackson's Mill, and also demonstrates some of the new and innovative sort of things that we're offering here in terms of classes and in terms of things that are going on here at Jackson's Mill. But just like everything else here at Jackson's Mill, that is the most recent development here at Jackson's Mill for our classes and for the things that we're teaching here. But over the years, this entire area and a number of these buildings around here have actually featured a variety of different things here. Behind me, before the steam building was in existence, a building named both Flameway and the Tower Building, it was the same building, just referred to two different ways, stood here. It was a partnership with one of the local gas companies that allowed a classroom space and a kitchen demonstration space cooking with natural gas. This was somewhat new early on in our history here at Jackson's Mill, and so it was a way to teach people how to be able to use and get comfortable with using natural gas for cooking and for other things like that. And so that building served for that purpose for many years. Eventually, in 2012, a large storm came through the area and a tree actually fell through the building. While it was sad to sort of see this building go, what it ultimately led to was the opportunity for us to construct this new building here on site. So even though sometimes things change here at Jackson's Mill, the mission and what we do here is always about teaching and learning, as they say in 4-H, how to make the best better. Behind me is one of the most iconic spots here at Jackson's Mill. Many 4-H campers would tell you that they believe this is the heart of Jackson's Mill. This is where the nightly campfire program, referred to as Council Circle, is held during 4-H camp. But this is not only a very special place for all the campers that come here today, but it was a very important spot to the very earliest campers. And the reason behind that was because when they started camp in 1921, they started campfire programs very early on. When they acquired a lot of that new property that we talked about, Director Kendrick and many others were looking for a spot, a permanent spot to have it. They were just holding it down near where the historic area is now, where a lot of the camping was happening. But with all this new land, they were looking around for a spot that would be the spot for the Council Circle and for the campfire program to happen day after day, year after year. And the story goes that two early campers to one of the very first camps were two young men, and they started walking through some woods, which is part of some of that new property that Jackson's Mill had just acquired. As they did, they came upon a spot where there was a natural bowl, and it seemed ideal. The sides sloped very gently towards a nice low point, a perfect spot to build a fire. There was only one problem. A huge tree sat right in the center of it. The boys went back and told Director Kendrick's right-hand person here, a man by the name of Uncle Charlie Hartley, and they told Uncle Charlie what they found. A perfect spot, but unfortunately there was this big tree there. Well, it seemed as though maybe it wasn't to be. But then, again as the story goes, that night, a huge storm passed through, and a bolt of lightning hit the tree, splitting it down to the root. The next day, when they went back out to show Uncle Charlie the spot, they found the tree in half. So eventually, they removed the tree, figuring this was a sign that this was where Council Circle had to be, and that's where it's been ever since. Over the years, tens of thousands of West Virginia 4-Hers have come here, and countless others of other types of groups and people have passed through this place. Again, this is one of the most iconic spots here at Jackson's Mill.
May will kick off National Beef Month, a month-long celebration of this local industry. We had the opportunity to pay a visit to a few producers in the Mountain State to learn more about their operations and the importance of this industry here in West Virginia. We'll start with a visit to Wardensville Bull Test, where we caught up with Amy and Bill Martin from Lovers Lane Farms.
It would be a goal of mine to see more of the American public appreciate the hard work that goes into producing these cattle, and what we try to do really hard to produce the high quality beef that they're able to purchase and enjoy.
Hi, I'm Amy Martin.
And I am Bill Martin. We are from Lovers Lane Farms in Moorfield, West Virginia, and this is West Virginia Beef. I am in partnership with my brother Jim. We are a third generation family-owned, family farming operation.
Lovers Lane Farms is a beef, crop, and poultry farm. We specialize in being a cow-calf operation. We graze yearling cattle in the heart of the Allegheny Mountains, and we also finish some cattle. Extension has been very instrumental in our operation as far as giving us guidance along the way of putting healthiness into our feeder cattle.
The beef industry is very important to the state of West Virginia because of all the vast pastures and climates that make it ideal for cow-calf operations and grazing yearlings. We have ideal soils to grow native grasses, and our climate, it gets warm but not too hot, it gets cool but not too cold. All those variables make grazing cows and calves and yearlings here better than it is other places.
We specialize in buying ball and calves in the state-graded West Virginia feeder sales and Virginia sales. Bill has served on the West Virginia Bull Test Committee. He is the only commercial producer on that committee. He has input from a commercial cattle producer standpoint and to be able to be a voice for the commercial cattle producers. We strive to stay resilient against the global agriculture. We combat economic factors, and we strive to maintain the integrity of our staff and of our farm. We want to pass that knowledge along to the young generation.
Next, let's pop over to the Greenbrier Valley to chat with the Tuckwiller Brothers, Jack and Reese. They're going to tell us a little more about their operation, which is now in its 8th generation.
The core of West Virginia Beef is utilizing the resources that we have behind us. All this grass, and it's all over the state, and it's huge. And all we have to do is take advantage of those resources, and we can promote the beef industry to the extreme.
I'm Jack Tuckwiller. And I'm Reese Tuckwiller with Tuckwiller Brothers Farms, and this is West Virginia Beef.
This is the Greenbrier Valley. This family has been farming this operation for the last 8 generations. Multiple members of my immediate family and extended family, a dozen plus, are active in the farming operation, with beef cattle being the center focus.
We emphasize a cow-calf operation with a little bit heavier influence on Angus cattle production, focusing on seed stock, implementing AI, embryo transfer. Here in Lewisburg, we also pride ourselves on the quality of grass and resources we have available in grass-type cattle, both fall and spring. These cool seasons offer us the ability to really capitalize on long grazing systems and practices throughout the year.
When I was a kid, we were doing it all by hand, square bales, pitchforks. Now we've gone to mechanization in the last 20 years, and currently we're looking at going to alternative with bale grazing and rotational grazing.
The future of West Virginia beef comes down to a couple points: developing our young people, focusing on quality genetics and alternate management practices. As we continue to fight a rise in input costs, we've got to really be able to combat the ability to diversify and ultimately meet the bottom line. Extension's been a viable resource for our family. My dad coached the judging team for 20 plus years and impacted so many kids and involved them in agriculture. I can remember Linda Simmons taking me to my first 4-H camp and where we are today. Without West Virginia Extension, I don't think we'd be capable of getting new information and new ideas to implement on our operation and help us be a little bit more profitable. We have one viable resource that is the backbone of this country, and that's grass. Being able to turn that grass into protein and supply a red meat source to the consumer and the public in the state of West Virginia. And I think we need to hang our hat on it and hold on to it as long as we can for the future generation.
Let's wrap up today's episode with a wrap. WVU Extension Family Nutrition Program educator Molly Poffenbarger is here to teach us how to make a blueberry cottage cheese wrap.
Hi, I'm Molly with West Virginia University Extension Family Nutrition Program, and today we are making a fruity cheese roll-up snack. This is an easy snack that your kids can do, and it has minimal ingredients. I've already washed our cooking surfaces and our fresh produce and my hands, so I'm all ready to get started. The first ingredient is 2 tablespoons of reduced fat cottage cheese, and this is just the small curd. Then we have a tablespoon of nuts. We use some almonds. You can use pecans, any kind of nuts that you may have on hand. And then a couple tablespoons of fruit. We've got blueberries. You could use canned fruit, fresh fruit. So the first thing we're gonna do is take our whole wheat tortilla. So we've got our added fiber in our tortilla. It's a great way to get some whole grains in, and spread our reduced fat cottage cheese onto the tortilla. And this is something the kids could help do, this part right here. I'm just using a butter knife. Spread that cottage cheese all over, and then sprinkle our fresh fruit and our nuts on top. And then you're just gonna roll it up like a burrito. Cut it in half, and we are ready to go. This snack covers all the bases. You've got your plant-based protein with your nuts, your fruit, your calcium-rich cottage cheese, and your whole grain with our whole wheat tortilla. And doesn't this look great? I'm gonna take a little bite. That would be a great snack to make with the kids sometime this summer. Be sure to check out our complete recipe on our YouTube channel or the website, and join me back here in the kitchen sometime soon. Thanks so much.
And that does it for another episode of WVU Extension Today. We'll see you next time.